And here it is here. This is the beginning of DX Commanders. I was indebted to a guy called Nigel. His call sign was G4NRR. So Nigel explained to me that, or for the about 20 of us in the room, is that a dipole, you got your coax coming up here, and the braid goes to one side, and the centre of the coax goes to the other. And if you cut that for a certain size, that's what we call a fundamental frequency. So he was saying, let's say that was about 30 feet, about 10 metres each leg. That's going to be resonant on or around 7-ish megahertz. And he also told us that if you multiply that by 3, it's also going to be resonate on 21 megahertz. Now, there's something called end effect, which you can look up, and I've only recently come across end effect, which means if you've got exactly a resonant antenna at 7.1, it's not going to be next resonant at 21.3 times 3, because of the end effect, it'll be a little bit higher. But anyway, he told me that with a dipole, and he also explained that whereas a dipole resonates every other harmonic, so 7 times 2 is 14 megahertz, it's not going to be resonant there. But if we drew a loop, a one wavelength loop, all the way around with 10 metres per leg, and we put a little 4-to-1 balun in there with our coax, then that's going to resonate on every harmonic. And I went down to, it must have been over 10 years ago now, and hopefully if my technology carries on working, I'll be able to show you what I'm doing, which is, I think, this button here. I went down to the south coast in Great Britain, a little place called Bude in Cornwall. And I had visions of putting up all sorts of stuff, dipoles actually, on aluminium poles, but the breeze was too great. And so I had a bit of aluminium, and I literally had full toolkit with me. In fact, I think they're the only family I know. We went on holiday with 2 cars because I couldn't get all my radio equipment in, right? So we went down, I drilled some holes, and I made up a 3-element parasitic array, as it so happens. This is the foot of one of them. I got 3 in a row. In fact, America, US, you guys were just straight ahead there. I'd never done anything like that before, and I ran a few watts, and I realised that by the sea, with a bit of power as well, I was being told by people at the other end that they'd never heard Europe that loud. And I think that's the reason, is because I was right by the sea and using this 3-element parasitic array. But I also drilled out a bit of plastic, and you can see the beginnings here of there's a bit of araldite epoxy resin here. There was a little SO239 under here. So that was the beginning of my vertical. And I mean, what a waste of resources this is. All stainless nuts and bolts and washers and so on underneath. It just happened to be a bit of plastic. Under here is actually a little bit of copper wire joining all these together, and they were my radials. However, I was just mucking around one day, and remembering this, I realised, quickly worked out, that it wasn't just a dipole. In fact, if we had a vertical on the ground with some radials, that this 7 times 3, that's why I was also getting 21 megahertz on my vertical. And I ran a few pile-ups on that. But on EHAM and QRZ and that sort of thing, it told us that a 3/4 wave vertical was a bit of a cloud warmer. Well, I wasn't discovering that, certainly not by the sea anyway. And as it turns out, after doing all the research, there is about an extra 3 dB, 2.5 to 3 dB gain on a 3/4 wave over a quarter wave. So I'll just park that one aside. So I'm playing with this antenna, which is just a vertical going straight up in the air. And I thought to myself, well, I wonder if I can apply Nigel's ideas, take my 40-metre vertical, because it's a 10-metre high pole, you see, I had these radials, which you saw the pictures of. I've got it on 7 megahertz, I've got it on 21 megahertz, but I definitely cannot get it on 14. So how about, a bit like a fan dipole, I just come off the feed point and I'll put a 20 meter, in other words, half the size. So this is for 14 megahertz off the side, like a fan dipole, you see. And this is the very first picture I've got of that experiment. And here it is here. This is the beginning of DX Commander. So I've got my Coax coming in here. I had to use my multimeter to work out that the braid actually went to the left-hand side and the centre of the conductor went up. And then I split it in two here with some automotive, connections and that sort of thing. And sure enough, a bit of trial and error, to be honest, because what I was discovering is that the spacing, not quite sure how I'm supposed to do this. The spacing between there and there, Tyler's probably going, no, there's a way you can draw that, right? But that spacing was fairly critical. And if I move the spacing around, it will change where the resonant frequency is. So it was quite critical to keep that in the same place. Right. So now I had a 3-band antenna with 2 bits of wire. I could do 40, 20, and 15, which in the main for a holiday is fine. You get away with that. You had a lot of fun. And I spent a week thinking about this and thinking, well, surely if we've got, how many more can you put on this? I had no idea. So I got, there's a farmer not far from here. I spoke to him and I said, I'm after a tiny workshop because I needed like a bench drill thing, what they call a drill press. Needed a proper workbench. Because my little garage here, at the house, is just not big enough to be able to do some proper work. He had a little workshop and it was, I don't know, about 12 foot by 10. I mean, it wasn't very big at all. But it was about 6 to 10 inches, particularly in the corner, full of absolute years of bits of hay and engine oil and dust and everything else. He opened the door and let me have a look at it. There was a workbench in there. He said, I don't know what I used to do. It was this little repair shop. He had a big one now. He said, I'm not using this. I said, Kevin, you can have it. I said, well, how much? I don't know. It was like £100 a month, about $120 a month. Absolutely nothing. But I took it as it was. I had to literally get my shovel out, shovel out all the corners. I painted the floor, jet washed it, painted the floor. It took a few months to get that up to speed. There was already electricity in there, which he billed me for, And I must have been, I think, 59 years old at the time. And I remember thinking that Mr. Honda didn't make his first motorcycle until he was 48 years old or something. And I thought, well, maybe it's okay to start a business when you're very old. So it was about 4 years ago. I'm 63 now. And then I just started making bits and pieces. So I'll just go back to my screen here, which you can't see. Hold on, I'll just find the next part of the presentation. I ended up having these aluminium plates made. Just show you how it all works. And we've got a number of elements going straight up a pole. And how I explain, that's an inverted L coming to the top left on 80 metres. I've got a nice way of explaining. My accountant said to me, why do you have all these wires? Why can't you just have one wire? And you might be able to use this, right? Is that it came off the top of my head for some reason. I was thinking of a guitar or a piano or something. And I said, just like a piano, grand piano, let's say, has the very long strings for the low notes and the very short strings for the high notes. So it's just the same in the radio spectrum, is that if you want to naturally resonate a wire with RF, it needs to be a particular length. So if we cut all these different elements on a particular length, what's going to happen is they will sing at the right frequency. So like a tuning fork, if you give a tuning fork, the wrong frequency, it won't resonate, will it? But if you hit it just at the right thing, it'll tune. So that's what a fan dipole basically is, and this is what a DX Commander is. So basically, we've now got a system that allows us to take 6 elements, which gives us, if you think about it, 40 meters, which also gives us 15. We can have 30, 20, 17, 12, and 10. And then with the magic of RF and because of the harmonics I discussed with you, on that configuration, it just so happens you get a good match on 6. And then I've seen people on YouTube actually opening the repeaters 50 miles away on 2 meters. Although as you know, on VHF, you really need a bit of height. You get it on your rooftop or something. And a diamond, X510 or something, was going to be infinitely better than basically a ground-mounted 2-meter antenna. So that's what DX Commander is. Starting a business at 58, and by the way, this is, I think, my 4th or 5th business. It got to the stage where I enjoyed it so much, I said to my wife, and my accountant used to be there once, he was kind of a business consultant. I said, this business, I used to have to wear a certain suit and tie and all that stuff. I said, I really don't want to do this. What I want to do is, I want to go down the workshop. I want to make, all right, this DX Commander into a business because, one, I think there's a market for it, and 2, I just think it's good fun. And if you've ever done something that is good fun, it's not like work, is it? Now, I've managed to make DX Commander into a business that employs my wife and my son and me, and I've designed my job where 80% of the job I enjoy, okay? Rather than 20% of the job. Very often, every job I've ever done, 20% is quite good fun. 80% is a grudge. It's a bit of a, what's the word? It's just a hassle, isn't it? I've managed to switch it around. So what I do now is, the day in the life of an antenna company for me is I open my email in the morning and inevitably there is someone who has asked me some of the daftest questions you've ever heard in your life. I would like to, I've got to say that we're probably all the same. We get some new piece of amateur radio equipment and it does come with a manual, doesn't it? Which is the last thing you look at. So when a DX Commander turns up on someone's doorstep, they know they should look at the manual, and eventually they will. But very often it's so kind of, natural. They go, oh, I know how this goes together. I can just see it, and they start assembling it all and everything else. But inevitably, certainly once a month, I get an email from someone who's got a problem. It says not tuning. I'm getting 3-to-1 SWR on every band, best. Or maybe they might have one band that works quite well, and they're just a little bit lost. So one guy, normally, I'm sorry to say this because you guys are in America, but it's normally an American who doesn't look at the manual and asks me to dial questions. But I must have spent about 3 weeks, about one email every day, and I got him to send me pictures and everything else. And it was only when he sent me the picture, and I said to him, because let's look at this, right? This is a circuit where you've got your coax coming up and going straight up the middle. And then on the braid, effectively, we need to connect the radials. So if you don't connect the radials, it kind of will work in a weird way because the coax itself will act as one radial. But very often, it's not very good. But this one, I must get this at least once a month. The guy says, he eventually admits, so he hasn't connected the radials because he hasn't installed it in the place in the garden he wants to put it in yet, That's the fundamental error that people don't even make. It's a bit like having your car delivered and the tyres are not pumped up. You haven't got any pressure. And the guy complaining to the manufacturer and saying, well, I was going to pump the tyres up when I was going to go down the motorway, This plate here, at the bottom, we can see the SO239 comes in, connects there. Now, because each of these elements, which I've colour-coded in a tape, 10-flex tape, they're colour-coded. And I've built and tested this in a very particular way. So 40 metres goes over there, I think 20 metres is here, Because they will actually all interact a little bit, it's best just to follow the instructions. So it says 40, 20, 30, whatever, But that's the other one. The cut chart is completely right. It would still work if you redo it in a different way, but you'd need different element lengths by, this much. So, user guides. I hate user guides as well, just as much as you do. And in fact, I I've got a TS990S, and I think I only ever look at the user guide if I'm trying to do something that I'm pretty sure the radio can do, and I've got no idea. Because I never printed it out, but it must be this thick. And the more modern a radio, the worse it gets. Years ago, right, I had an FT101ZD Mark III. Okay, now some of you on this Zoom call will remember the old Yaesu FT101ZDs. You switched it on, then you've got the heater for the tubes. You have to wait a while. I'm not joking. It took me about 2 hours to get the thing to transmit. It wasn't like a transistor radio where you just hit the button and it all goes. Now there is a video, and maybe I should just send this to you rather than doing it all here, but there is a video of taking down and putting up this antenna. It's simply, you lay the pole down on a couple of garden chairs or, out the trunk of your car or whatever onto some sort of little tripod-y thing, or just on the floor. I don't like bending down all the way to the floor. All the plates slip on. We've got these little clamps, little screw clamps from a company called H-Shell that works really well. It all holds it together, and then the Tyler found a video. It's just a case of getting the wires that are pre-cut. I don't cut them. You do. You get a tape measure out, you just cut it. Oh, it's there. Fold it back, put a bit of marine heat shrink on it, and there it is. Shock cord to the top. Doingy doingy. And it's as long as you want to take it. Tom, 0RNY, went round the Isle of Arran, ARRAN, which is about a 90-mile walk. He did it in a week because he's, in the army and everything. He put a DX Commander Expedition. I built it for him because he came down to the workshop. We made a video about it. And he had his up in about 7 or 8 minutes, apparently. He guaranteed that to me because I thought, no way anybody could do it that quickly. But he did. I think he put 3 elements on it. That was a more compact. I'm not going to go through. This isn't a sales pitch particularly, right? I'm inspiring you today to pass on that good stuff that Nigel did for me all those years ago. I can't remember when Yagi, the two guys, the Yagi that they know and love, the Yagi antenna, it's like a TV aerial, isn't it? But, big time. And certainly 30 years ago, there was a few pounds, a few dollars knocking around in the economy. A lot of people had towers. They put three element, the tribander, the typical tribander up. They could hear very well. They could transmit very well. And the whole world of having one antenna that did everything, particularly for the upper end of HF, works fine. Same with the lower end of HF. You might have a big dipole for 160, or maybe a fan dipole for 160, 1840. And that would work really well. But over the last, certainly 10 years, a lot of people have suffered this noise business, with the next door neighbour's fairy lights and all this trash that has been, all the costs been taken out of the transformers and circuitry and everything. We have to cope with a lot of hash these days. So the business of one antenna doing everything, sometimes I think maybe we ought to be rethinking that again. And I've certainly over the last year looked at this business of a loop on the ground, and you can do a search, Google search for loop. They can actually call it loop on ground, LOG, loop on ground. And my favourite is 15 feet square, like this. It's got this little binocular core. You can buy these, right, in a little box, little transformer effectively, which connects to it. And you can put coax in here. Just cheap coax. Doesn't need to be super efficient coax. You just receive, And that has slight gain that way and that way, slightly more than this way. And that's 15 feet square all the way around. And that is my 40-meter receive antenna. And I've got to say that I'm listening on 40 on my big vertical. And I will switch to my receive loop. And now put the preamp on. and I've got roughly the same signal strength as I had on my vertical, but the noise is gone. I mean, it's like chalk and cheese. So I would encourage you to have a look, particularly if you've got noise issues. And to be honest, the 15 feet by 15 feet square, it could be a circle, doesn't really matter. You're getting gain roughly perpendicular to the feed point, though. Although I don't find that. I think at very, very low angles, you get slightly more gain. I haven't been using it at night, though, on 40 metres. I'm thinking of making one twice the size because that 15 feet for 40 metres is just perfect. I'm thinking of making one twice the size for 80 metres. There we are. So, receive antennas. Right? If you've got a problem with receive, I'm not going to go into the whole myth, which I think is mostly a myth, that your local QRM is generated vertically polarised. It's not. It's coming out all sorts of ways. Okay. The only reason your vertical's picking it up, well, two reasons really. One, it's designed to be a low angle antenna, so it can hear that stuff just round the corner. And secondly, horizontal polarisation is generally absorbed more than vertical as it travels across the ground to your antenna, which is a couple of 100 feet away, whatever. Right. So what can you do? And I wanted to... a lot of people have invest in some smart, fancy gear, don't they? They have these radios. I'll just draw a radio. Big radio, They've got the main VFO there, and you've got a little sub-VFO here. VFO A and B. Now, depending on the model, sometimes you can put this VFO on one frequency and that VFO on another frequency, which I rarely do, actually, because I've got one of these. And, the real big seller about 20 years ago was the FT1000MP, okay? And I can't remember if you can unsync them out, on 2 different bands, but it doesn't matter, because I do remember, because I've had a 1000MP, there's a track button. So you hit the track button, and they lock in, okay? So you can take this frequency, send it over to that VFO, and then you could track it. So as you spin this dial, this doesn't actually move, of course, but the frequency on the two VFOs goes together. And that often means that on the back of the radio, you've got these, I think on an FT1000MP, you had a number of sockets, SO239s. You can put your main transmit antenna through your amplifier, into, your regular SO239. And then you could take one of these and put it into a different SO239. So you can have on your left ear your transmit antenna, let's say, and your right ear, you could have a receive antenna on exactly the same frequency. And when I first did that, I actually couldn't quite believe the benefit, because I love generating a bit of a pile-up. I just find it good fun, right? Just getting going. And what I noticed with the two VFOs is that how I view the world, if you shut your eyes and you're in a room and 100 people shout their call sign, it's just a mess, isn't it? But with the two VFOs, what's happening is that although you've got the bassy guy, you can kind of picture kind of being, at 11 o'clock or your 2 o'clock, and you get the guy, with a really thin Heil microphone. He's maybe a bit over here, but in this kind of virtual stereo world, a bit like diversity reception, is a complete 3D map. And sometimes you can hear people as they shout in their call sign, drifting between, as their polarization changes. You can drift between the left ear and the right ear, but it is almost a 3D picture going this way and that way. Obviously, I haven't got the height. That'd be fun, wouldn't it, with another antenna? So I encourage you, if you've got, particularly for two VFO radio, to try that one out. It's a really lovely experience. if you haven't got a 2 VFO radio, and even a 7300's got this on the main board, it just doesn't have it. I don't know why they didn't put a socket on the back. But the ICOM 7300 is the one radio I know at the kind of just over $1,000 that doesn't have a dedicated receive jack. There is. If you've got a 7300, you can do a mod and bring a jack out that's on the board to a little phono plug or something on the back. So you're now dedicated on receive. So you can't. It's not as good as having 2 VFOs, but I would just encourage you to go down the receive route. If you're into HF, there's nothing like having a fantastic receive, and because the thing is, our modern radios, certainly in the last 20 years, there's enough gain and boost when you've got the preamp on. You don't need any outboard amplification at all. Because this is all about signal to noise ratio. So if you dump the signal and the noise and then just lift the signal up, then that separation is what you hear. So I can give people a 5 and 9, effectively. But my meter's not moving. And incidentally, this whole signal report baloney, the real signal report is not the signal meter itself. It's your perception of what it sounds like. Very often, if it's absolutely crystal clear, I'll give them a 5 and 9 because they're absolutely crystal clear. And I think there's a great Wikipedia page. If you just did a Google search for signal reports, and it explains what 5 and 9 originally meant. Right? People now say it's 5 and 9 because it's S9, or 5 and 8 because it's S8. I try and... I'm on a losing battle, right? I realise that. But because people say, you just gave him a 5 and 9, but the meter's not moving, because I often live stream, on my HF stuff. But he sounded 5 and 9. So I actually correct. I say, in my ears, you're about 5 and 7. Because he's just starting to drift away. 5 and 5, 5 and 4. Eventually, it becomes 4 and 1, or 3 and 1, when I can only just detect him. On a receive antenna, very often the meter itself will hardly move, but the audio is crystal clear. So you've just got to guess the signal report is subjective, isn't it, really? Unless you want to give them what is my S meter? Well, what's my antenna? It's pointless if you've got, stacked Yagis at 100 and 200 feet, when you're 30 over. The guy's going to think, I'm getting out really well. But actually, no. All the work's been done at the other end. So, but on the other hand, if he goes, you're about at 5 and 5. So I thoroughly recommend going to Wikipedia, doing a search for signal reports and using that chart. Because that doesn't matter, what antenna you've got. Okay, but before we go then, let's just cover something on radials. So ground radials... And I'm not talking about an earth spike, which is great for lightning protection, but won't really do anything for your RF. So a fellow called Rudy Sevens, he's an American, or is it Canadian? No, I think he's American. He's done a number of experiments. And the experiment that I haven't yet done, but I'd like to, is he took quarter wave radials. So all these are the same size. And he did, 1, 4, 8, 16, all that sort of stuff. And did some really, it must have taken him days, actually. And then what he did, sort of the final part of the jigsaw, he thought, I wonder what happens if I cut all these in half here, just cut them off, just literally cut them. Again, 8, 16, 32, whatever else. And I'll take these bits, but I'll add them back in. Okay? I'll add them back in. So these are now 8th wave radials. And what he found, it was an insignificant change. Was measurable, but you wouldn't, it's like 0.1 dB difference. So a lot of people think that an ON4UN, the low band DX book, absolutely insists on quarter wave minimum radials. You don't need that. The only time you absolutely need quarter wave or more is Dr. George Brown from RCA Labs in the 30s, and I finally found this is where the 120 radial myth comes from, by the way. But he was investigating short, medium wave transmitting antennas, maybe eighth of wave or less. Then, and only then, now you need much better ground to compensate. So, but a lot of people say, oh, I don't have the ground to put a vertical in. Well, on 80 meters, I was using these here at 35 times, and I think they were 3 meters long, about 9 feet. On 80 meters, I was crossing the Atlantic on SSB. Down by the coast, in fairness. I was getting a perfect tune, and it was 3 meters. I mean, blooming hell. Or 80, 10th, 20th, 20th of a wavelength. Magic, isn't it? All right, any questions for me? If there's not, that's fine, I'll go.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your story, and really the message that I think we're taking away is go play, go try, go do new stuff. Thank you so much. Sorry for the short time frame here.